Ron Howard often says his parents were never the type to push him too hard, but life in Hollywood was far from easy. Behind the smiles and carefully chosen rules, there were years of struggle, close calls, and secrets that shaped his childhood. Back in 1973, Harrison Ford and Paul Lamat once pulled a prank on Ron that he still remembers. They threw bottles at his car and even locked him in a trailer, teasing him with what they called Opie shaming. It sounds like a silly Hollywood story, but it was only one small piece of a much bigger picture. For 50 years, Ron stayed quiet about what really went on behind the scenes. The near-fatal accidents, the lawsuits that drained millions, and the family struggles that almost tore his personal life apart. Now he has begun to open up about that journey, admitting that the path to becoming one of America's most beloved directors was anything but easy. Ron was born on March 1, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma. His dad, Rance, was a struggling actor and writer, while his mom, Jean, also worked as an actress. They didn't have much money, and times were very hard. In 1958, when Ron was only 4, his parents made a risky choice. They packed up everything and moved to Hollywood, hoping to find better jobs and a brighter future. Their new home was tiny, but it sat close to a major studio. Ron grew up surrounded by cameras, film sets, and actors, not in a preschool classroom, but on sound stages where he watched and learned. His first appearance on screen came even earlier. In January 1956, at just 18 months old, Ron was in a film called Frontier Woman. His father had needed a baby for a scene and decided to use him. That tiny role was the start of a career no one could have imagined. By July of that same year, little Ron was performing live in theater productions. But even as opportunities came in, his parents refused to sign him to long-term contracts until he turned 5. They wanted him to stay a child for as long as possible. That decision nearly broke the family financially. By 1957 and 1958, they were barely surviving. At times, they couldn't even afford rent. Rance thought seriously about giving up on Hollywood and moving back to Oklahoma to become a farmer. They pawned personal belongings and scraped by, all while protecting their son from the harsh side of child stardom. Finally, in 1959, when Ron turned 5, his parents agreed to let him take on bigger roles. That same year, he landed a part in The Journey, and for the first time, his name appeared in the credits. It wasn't all happy, though. On set, some crew members mocked his freckles and red hair, calling him names that cut deeply. His dad even got into an argument with one of them while trying to defend him. Despite the pain, that small paycheck, just $12,500, meant the world to the struggling family. Around the same time, Ron's younger brother Clint was born. Money was still tight, and debt kept piling up, but his parents kept him in public school and tried to give him as normal a childhood as possible. Everything changed in 1960. At just 6 years old, Ron auditioned against more than 300 kids and won the role of Opie Taylor on The Andy Griffith Show. The series became a massive hit, running for 249 episodes, and Ron appeared in 243 of them. At the start, he earned $300 an episode, and by the end, $1,000. That was life-changing money for his family. But with that success came heavy responsibilities. Ron had to memorize lines, deliver perfect performances, and work long hours, all while still being a child. The set wasn't always easy. Andy Griffith, who became both his mentor and close friend, struggled with alcohol and sometimes got into heated arguments that scared young Ron. Still, Andy always treated him with respect and helped him through emotional scenes. Their bond lasted a lifetime, and years later, they discovered they were distant cousins, which made their connection even more meaningful. Not all the memories were warm, though. In 1962, while filming a fishing scene on a lake, 8-year-old Ron nearly drowned. The boat tipped over, and he fell into the water. Without hesitation, Andy Griffith jumped in and saved him. The producers decided to cover up the incident, fearing it would hurt the show's image. For decades, almost no one knew how close Ron had come to tragedy that day. Ron never forgot the near-drowning accident from his childhood. Back in those days, there weren't many safety rules for child actors. Kids could work long hours with little protection, and accidents were common. That terrifying moment on the Andy Griffith Show left a lasting impression on Ron. Years later, when he became a director, he made sure every film set he worked on had strict safety measures in place. By 1968, when the Andy Griffith Show ended, Ron was 14. He thought his career might keep moving forward, but instead, he faced rejection after rejection. Between 1968 and 1969, he auditioned more than 50 times and failed to land a role. Casting directors only saw him as Opie, and it felt like he was trapped in that character. He told his parents he wanted to quit acting. To survive, he accepted smaller roles, like appearing in Gentle Ben in 1969 for only $500 per episode, far less than what he used to make. In 1970, he lost out on the lead role in The Wild Country, which was another big disappointment. In 1971, he joined the cast of The Smith Family, earning $8,000 for 39 episodes. But the show was a flop, and things didn't get easier. All of these failures gave him anxiety, though he kept it hidden from others. At school, he tried to be a normal teenager. He played basketball and averaged 12 points a game. But even then, he felt stuck between wanting a regular life and being pulled back into Hollywood. Everything changed again in 1973. At 19 years old, Ron was cast in American Graffiti, directed by George Lucas. On the surface, it was exciting, an opportunity to work on a film that later became iconic. But behind the scenes, he was bullied by his co-stars Harrison Ford and Paul Le Mat. On July 15, 1973, they threw beer bottles near his car and mocked him, yelling, "Dance, Opie, dance." A few days later, on July 20th, they locked him inside a trailer, making him miss rehearsals. They even spiked his drinks, all because they didn't respect his background as a former child star. Ron kept quiet and endured it, later calling it his only moment of true Opie shaming. Despite everything, he made it through and earned $10,000 for the role. Years later, Harrison Ford apologized, but the pain of those days never left him. Ron's personal life also carried challenges. He had met Cheryl Alley in high school in 1970, and their first date was on November 1st. Soon after, rumors spread that Cheryl was pregnant, even though they were just 16. The gossip grew quickly. In January 1971, Ron had to deny it in the school newspaper. By February, tabloids picked it up, and he even lost a $2,000 TV guest role because of the scandal. Cheryl was devastated, but the two stayed together. Ron proposed to her 3 times before she finally said yes in October 1974. They married on June 7, 1975, in Burbank with a simple $800 wedding, and they've now been together for 50 years. Ron often calls her his good luck charm. Money, however, was still a problem. In January 1971, Ron took a paper route to help make ends meet. He delivered 200 newspapers before school every day and earned about $150 a month, which he used to take Cheryl out. On April 5, 1971, he was rear-ended by a truck on his way to an audition. He suffered whiplash, had $3,000 in medical bills, and no insurance to cover it. He even had to sell his bike for $200 to pay for the bills. The pain stayed with him for years and affected how he moved during certain film scenes later in life. When American Graffiti came out in 1973, it became a huge hit. It earned $115 million in the US on a budget of only $777,000. But Ron only received a flat $10,000 with no share of the profits. He asked George Lucas for 1% of the earnings, which would have been worth more than $1 million. But Lucas said no. It damaged their friendship and left Ron frustrated. To have steady work again, he joined Happy Days in 1974. At first, he earned $1,000 per episode playing Richie Cunningham. The show debuted on January 15, 1974, and immediately pulled in 11 million viewers. It focused on Richie's teenage life in 1950s Milwaukee. But by 1976, the character Fonzie, played by Henry Winkler, became the breakout star. Ratings exploded, reaching 31 million viewers weekly. ABC even wanted to rename the show Fonzie's Happy Days. That year alone, Fonzie merchandise made more than $1 million. Ron wasn't okay with being pushed aside. In November 1976, he told producers that if they changed the title, he would quit, even though his contract ran until 1980. The news leaked to Variety magazine on December 5, and fans were outraged. ABC received over 10,000 letters demanding the show stay as Happy Days. In the end, the network backed down, and Ron stayed. But the experience changed him forever. By 1977, the show was making $50 million a year. Winkler was earning $75,000 per episode, while Ron made $25,000. Ron later admitted in a 1980 interview that this moment pushed him to think more seriously about directing. Meanwhile, tensions grew on set. Anson Williams, who played Potsy, earned just $12,000 per episode, half of Ron's salary. On November 16, 1976, during filming of an episode called The Muckrakers, Williams stormed off set after a scene was rewritten to favor Ron. Rumors even spread about a physical fight, though nothing was ever proven. ABC kept it quiet to protect the show. Years later, in 2012, Williams and other cast members sued CBS for $10 million in unpaid royalties for merchandise sales. They claimed they never saw money from things like Happy Days lunchboxes, which sold more than 5 million units in 1976 alone. The case was settled on April 4, 2012, and each of them received just $65,000. Williams said he never earned more than $100,000 a year while the studio made millions. Ron wasn't part of the lawsuit, but in a 2025 interview, he admitted the whole ordeal strained friendships. Even while acting on Happy Days, Ron quietly began directing. In early 1975, he made his first short film, Deed of Daring Do. It was only 10 minutes long and shot during a 2-week break with just $2,000. Henry Winkler even made a cameo. The film premiered at a small festival on June 15, 1975. There were rumors of plagiarism, but nothing was ever proven. The real problem came when producer Roger Corman asked for reshoots in April 1975, costing Ron an extra $500. Despite the stress, the film later won a small prize at the Atlanta Film Festival that September. That little project pushed him toward his first feature film. In 1977, at just 23 years old, Ron directed Grand Theft Auto. He also starred in it and co-wrote it with his father, Rance. The film cost $600,000 but earned $15 million. But during filming, tragedy almost struck again. A stunt went wrong, and stuntman Paul Bartle suffered broken bones and internal injuries. Ron feared his directing career would end before it began. The lawsuit was settled quietly in 1978, but it shook him deeply. From then on, he made safety the top priority in every project. By the time he directed Splash in 1984, starring Tom Hanks, his career had taken off. The film cost $11 million to make and earned $69.8 million at the box office, turning Hanks into a star and proving Ron was more than just a former child actor. He was becoming one of Hollywood's most successful directors. Behind the success and awards, Ron Howard's directing career was filled with chaos, danger, and personal struggles that most people never saw. When filming Splash in 1983, tensions rose on set. Tom Hanks had frequent tantrums, especially about script changes. On July 15, during filming in New York, Hanks got into a screaming match with the crew, and Howard had to step in to stop a fight. The studios almost canceled the project, but Disney saved it by releasing it under their new Touchstone label. Despite the trouble, the movie became a huge hit. Things got even scarier in 1985 while filming Cocoon in Florida. On February 12, Howard received a death threat from an angry extra named Harold Jenkins, who had been fired from the film. Jenkins felt the story mocked elderly people and sent violent letters. Fox had to spend $150,000 on 24-hour security. The script was softened, and the release was delayed, but the film went on to make $85 million and won Oscars. In 1988, Howard directed Willow, based on an idea George Lucas had since 1972. The film had a massive $35 million budget and earned $137.6 million worldwide. But it still lost around $20 million due to high marketing costs and mixed reviews. Behind the scenes, Lucas and Howard clashed constantly. In June 1987, they argued bitterly over $5 million in cuts, and Howard nearly quit. Home video sales later helped it break even. In 1989, Howard released Parenthood, inspired by a chaotic flight to Australia where his 4-year-old daughter threw up sushi on him. The film cost $20 million and made $126 million. But just before its release, writer Elena Vasquez sued Howard in May, claiming he stole her script. The lawsuit was settled for $500,000 in June, and the film moved forward. In 1991, Backdraft tested Howard again. While filming on July 23, 1990, a stunt went horribly wrong. A fire grew out of control, burning Kurt Russell's hand and face, while 3 other crew members were also injured. An OSHA investigation later found serious safety violations. Howard admitted the cast never knew when the fire would turn on them. Still, the film earned $152 million and received an Oscar nomination. In 1995, Howard took on Apollo 13, a story that demanded perfection. Tom Hanks insisted on exact NASA transcript accuracy. On October 12, 1994, he demanded rewrites, and by October 15, production shut down, costing $2 million. Howard threatened to quit, and NASA staff had to mediate. The movie finally came together, earning $355 million and winning Oscars. In 1996, Ransom came out and made $309 million, but Howard's personal life was shaken. While filming, someone sent letters threatening his children, mirroring the film's kidnapping storyline. The FBI got involved, phones were tapped, and suspicious cars followed his family. They were relocated in March 1996, but no one was ever arrested. Howard later admitted this was his most personal film because of the real fear he faced. In 2000, How the Grinch Stole Christmas with Jim Carrey became a box office hit, earning $345 million. But Carrey's makeup routine, which took 2.5 hours a day, drove him over the edge. On March 22, he snapped and shoved Howard during an argument, halting filming. Carrey promised better behavior and returned by April, and the film later won an Oscar for makeup. In 2001, Howard released A Beautiful Mind, which won Best Picture and Best Director at the Oscars in 2002. But filming was a nightmare. Russell Crowe had violent outbursts, once throwing a phone at a hotel clerk on June 10. On April 15, Howard even fired him, but 2 days later, rehired him to avoid massive losses. Jennifer Connelly later said Howard held the production together through the chaos. Controversy exploded in 2006 with the Da Vinci Code. Religious groups protested worldwide, especially the Catholic Church. The film suggested that Jesus married Mary Magdalene and had a child, which was covered up by Opus Dei. Protests erupted in India and the Philippines, where it was restricted to adults. Howard received death threats and had to hire bodyguards after a bomb scare at the Cannes premiere on May 17. Critics mocked it, but it earned $760 million. In Italy, both Howard and writer Dan Brown nearly got arrested for filming without permits. The Vatican condemned it as anti-Catholic, but the outrage only fueled more curiosity. In 2009, Angels and Demons caused more friction with the church. The Vatican refused to allow filming in real churches, forcing Howard to build fake sets. He later claimed this boycott cost him $50 million. Despite protests, the movie still made $485 million. In 2013, Howard directed Rush, a film about the 1976 Formula One rivalry. During filming on August 1, stunt driver David Crowder was badly injured when a car crashed during a fiery scene. He later sued, saying safety was ignored, and the case settled in 2014. Just 18 days after the film's release on September 27, stunt coordinator Sean Edwards' son died in a car crash, sparking more criticism. People said Howard glorified danger too much. In 2015, his company Imagine Entertainment faced backlash over The Good Lie, a film about Sudanese refugees. 54 survivors sued in February 2015, claiming their real-life stories of starvation and survival were used without fair pay. They had been promised support but never received it. The lawsuit was settled in 2017, but the damage to Howard's reputation was real. In 2017, Howard was pulled into chaos with Solo, a Star Wars story. The original directors were fired, and Howard stepped in, reshooting nearly 70% of the film. The budget ballooned to $275 million, and the release was delayed. Fans were angry, and some accused Howard of making the film too safe. While it earned $393 million, it was far below expectations and is still considered one of the franchise's biggest disappointments. Through it all, Howard's family life was both a source of strength and controversy. In 2025, his daughter Bryce Dallas Howard openly discussed being a Nepo baby and admitted her Hollywood privilege. Some praised her honesty, while others accused Ron of helping her career too much. Her godfather, Henry Winkler, remained close to the family, and Bryce built her own path with Jurassic World, which made over $1.6 billion. Ron's father, Rance Howard, passed away on November 25, 2017, at age 89. He acted until the very end, finishing a role just 36 hours before his death. Rumors of a will dispute between Ron and his brother Clint surfaced, but nothing was ever proven. Instead, they continued to collaborate, and Ron praised Clint as one of his closest allies. On June 7, 2025, Ron and Cheryl celebrated 50 years of marriage. They met in high school and had their first date on November 1, 1970, watching It's a Mad, 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 Mad World before getting pizza. Through decades of rumors, career struggles, and personal threats, they raised 4 children and 6 grandchildren. On Instagram, Ron shared how grateful he was for the ups and downs they survived together. Despite whispers of near divorce in the 1980s, their bond endured. Behind the camera, Ron Howard's life and career often became just as dramatic as the movies he directed. Even when things looked perfect on screen, there were plenty of struggles, conflicts, and shocking moments happening in the background. In 2020, Ron shared that his marriage was stronger than ever, despite rumors from the past.